Steven Universe and all associated images are property of Cartoon Network, Rebecca Sugar, and any and all other respective owners. I don't know them all. All footage in this video has been used for the purpose of critique parody under fair use. Please support the official release. I mentioned in the video immediately previous to this one, the second Steven Nuke themed theory information update video, that my next theory was going to be something quite different than anything I've done before. Believe it or not, I went back and forth quite a bit on whether or not I actually wanted to make this video, because quite frankly I'm not sure how well it's going to be received. But I really want to try something different here without actually going too far off the rails. This is still a Steven Universe theory, it's just a different kind of Steven Universe theory than I usually make. And don't worry, the second part to my theory that the gems were not originally made to serve the diamonds will be out next week in the form of my Origin of Gems theory, one that I know a lot of you have been looking forward to for quite some time. Basically, the point of this theory is to explore the idea that Steven Universe is a work of fiction in universe. That all of the events that we know of as Steven Universe are actually stories that exist within the imagination of one of the characters. This is a theory that's been explored quite a bit in the past. Not only in this series, but in others. One such of these theories that you may have heard of is the Ash's Coma theory, a theory that suggests that the events of the main series Pokemon anime only exist within the head of the main character after he falls into a coma, explaining away some of the oddities of the show, such as the fact that the main character doesn't seem to age. And I'm going to get it out of the way right here at the beginning that this is definitely not the direction that the writers are taking. I don't think this is actually true. Just like the Ash's Coma theory is clearly not the direction that the writers of the Pokemon anime are taking. It's just a fun idea to talk about. I know that I'm typically the go-to guy for Steven Universe theories that are very rooted in logic, but every once in a while I'd like to go against that a little bit and talk about a theory that doesn't really make any logical sense at all. After all, those types of theories can be a lot of fun too. Typically, when one of these theories is presented, the idea is put forth that the entire series exists within the imagination of a fully human Steven who misses his dead mother and wishes that he were special, or something equally depressing like that. But I have an entirely different take on this theory, one that suggests that the events of the series exist within the imagination of not Steven, but Connie. This is actually something I've been thinking about for a very long time, and it's been helped along in part by a post that I encountered on my Tumblr feed relatively recently. If you guys follow me over there, you may have seen it, pointing out that the book that Connie is carrying in the original Steven Universe intro is actually A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L. Ingle, which is a fantastic book. You guys really should check it out. And actually pointed out a few similarities between the plotline of the series and the plotline of that particular book. Mainly that at its basest level, A Wrinkle in Time is about a strong-willed young girl who encounters a boy with special powers and must team up with him and a group of 3 celestial beings in the form of women to take on a totalitarian regime from another planet. There are some major differences, of course, such as the fact that the female lead in A Wrinkle in Time has a brother who's very prominent in the story, and the fact that it's the male lead who is the more academic of the two, unlike in Steven Universe, where it's the other way around. But there does seem to be a similarity. It's a connection that I myself had never actually thought of, but now that the connection's been made, I'd be shocked if the plot of the series didn't take some inspiration from the book. In the version of the series that I'm presenting here, Connie is actually the main character, but she's a very passive main character in the same way that the main character in A Wrinkle in Time was in many ways a very passive main character. Someone who is kind of along for the ride, which isn't a terrible way of describing the male lead either. In many ways, he's also just along for the ride, a lot like how Steven is at the beginning of the series. In this version of the story, Connie hears from her father that they're going back to Beach City, a town that they lived in for a short period of time once not long ago. Connie, who has been reading A Wrinkle in Time, tackling it bit by bit, as it is a pretty difficult book that's a bit above her reading level, thinks back on her time in the town and remembers seeing the annual parade, and for some reason, the young boy on the car wash float stands out to her. Influenced by the book that she's been reading, she begins to imagine that that boy is a lot like the young boy in the book, someone with fantastic powers who could whisk her away on a magical adventure. Maybe she even starts to write her ideas down, and that's why they differ so much from the actual plot of A Wrinkle in Time, because she wants to distinguish her ideas from those. The episodes of Steven Universe as we know them that take place before Connie is introduced would be Connie's imaginings before she actually returned to Beach City with her family. At this point, she actually starts to forget about her imaginary scenario until the return to town, when Connie, while sitting on the beach and reading a book, sees this boy off playing on his own. Too nervous to actually approach him, Connie instead goes back to her imaginings, except that now she lives in town again. She can imagine herself in those scenarios as well. Eventually, her family moves away from Beach City again as her father is once again transferred to another temporary job. After all, it was established that Connie and her family move around a lot, and yet that isn't what we've seen. but she continues to tell herself stories of the mystery boy that she wishes she had talked to. And of course, now that she's written herself into those stories, it's kind of hard to stop. This explains everything from some of the early retcons present in the series, to the fact that it can't quite seem to decide whether or not it wants to be fantasy or science fiction, with its fantastical elements being called magic by the gems, but clearly being rooted in real science, or at least a limited understanding of real science. In this scenario, specific details that we've learned about Connie are still valid, and we know that Connie is someone who often reads academic books that are above her grade level. She's also quite smart, and it isn't too far of a stretch to think that she would have a basic understanding of some pretty advanced sciences already. It explains the many media influences on Steven Universe's story. Rather than references written in by the writers, there are other media that Connie has been exposed to influencing her imagination. It even explains why Steven, the hero of the story, seems perfectly content to take a back seat to other characters, often acting more like Connie's sidekick than the main protagonist, because he's not. Connie is. Characters like Lion are explained away by the fact that Connie is a huge fan of a book series about familiars. She dreamed up a familiar for her version of Steven, one that her version of Steven and herself could share in her musings. Any inconsistencies to the rules of the universe, such as Lapis's seeming ability to travel from one galaxy to another under her own power in just a few months, can all be explained away by the fact that Connie doesn't really understand quite how large space actually is. I could go on, picking out little thing after little thing that this theory potentially explains away. After all, that's how these theories work. Theories like this one exist primarily to explain away the oddities in the story structure of a show, like the aforementioned Pokemon theory. But again, clearly this is not the actual direction that the writers intend to take the series. They intend for the events in the show to be real in universe. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave those connections for you guys to make yourself. That is, depending on what it is that you think of this theory. Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.